Okay.
Really?
Yeah.
So we're gonna close this down.
Huh? What do you mean? Really?
Oh, they already have a different sign up.
Really?
Yeah.
They gotta crank up the heat, I'm telling you. This is building gets heat.
Yeah, they're actually already flying a different sign.
Like the heat in my house, but I think I need a new heating element.
Oh, boy.
Heat very much.
Yeah,
really.
Well, one side of the heat's up there, the other side I'm still air
Who are they switching to?
Still hoping.
Who are they switching to?
I don't have that big enough.
What? That's big stuff. Right. It's like the uber non-kosher stuff.
What?
It's like the uber non-kosher stuff.
Want to
do? Oh, because you use it as a microphone?
Yeah. I'm live already.
Oh, you want to hold?
Why would you be opening it? It's gonna let more cold in it. Keep the insulation on.
I don't know if that provides any insulation. Usually it conducts very well through metal.
Yeah, less, yeah, going less, that's it. More light radiation.
Morning, Phil.
My father's car seems to dislike the cold more than anything.
Oh, no.
It took an extra few minutes before it stopped, like, rumbling.
I started explaining to, people how in cold places you actually have to warm up your car before
I
you
haven't
go.
had to do that in like 5 years.
Right. Warming up your car.
Actually, when we lived in Atlanta, at one point my father got to John for to move up to Buffalo. He was like, as a kid, he was, like, I remember him saying, we didn't do it because I didn't want to wake up at 3 a.m. to warm up the car so I could go to work at 7 or 8.
Pretty crazy.
So I was in Connecticut last week for a bris of one grandson.
Oh,
I had to go to Silver Spring, Maryland for a bris of another one.
Oh, wow. Diana Hara.
Gonna miss 2 years. But I'll watch them on Zoom.
Okay, good. Baruch Hashem for simples. They go into cold places, though.
Yeah, it's freezing.
Am I correct? Kala Mikvah in Hollywood is not on top of the mikvah, it's on the side.
It's on the side.
Just for concept.
That's what I heard.
Is that what you're gonna call them?
The Krispy Kreme, you mean on your last round?
Huh?
Yeah, the Krispy Kreme this might be your last round.
Why?
Because they already are flying. They're already still going for a couple of weeks, but then we'll see what happens.
Harvey, I think we have a new topic.
What's happening?
It's donuts.
Huh?
Well, what's happening? They're switching their stuff.
See,
I don't
I guess
know. Maybe they.
Oh, what's this one?
Once, or they're, I don't know.
As long as that Dunkin' Donuts
Switching
is
their
good
hot stuff.
enough that they don't shut
Oh, they
down
are.
for operational
That
problems.
is the reason not to use that.
Might be an issue.
They're switching it to NK.
Including
Not kosher.
exploding and like spraying.
Most people like that joke.
And they're just like, oh, I got a mop up of the work
There's
site.
an article
Offer it.
from a couple years back when I first saw that the original owners of the company were real huge people.
That's great.
But the son or the grandson
Got a diagram.
looked into it. They actually donated $5 million to Holocaust. But these people, they eventually bought 50 Creek.
What are they?
So I think Gerald's gonna have to pick up Dunkin' Donuts every week from now on.
So the thing is,
Huh?
It seems like a trend.
I personally think I think Dunkin' Donuts are better
I heard
anyway.
it's no longer.
You have to go to Hollywood.
You also think of that.
There's so much not kosher. The places on your
Because all those that are on their stuff, not all of them are good, right?
Okay, good morning. I'd like to thank everybody for braving the cold, the historic cold we have here in Florida. Sorry to all the New Yorkers, but as I look around the room, people in sweaters, sweatshirts, coats. As I told some people, all you need is to spend one day in New York, and you come back here to Florida, even in the cold, it's not a problem. That's the real trick for a midwinter vacation, is you don't go to a warmer place, you go to a colder place. And that way, you're more used to your environment for the rest of the winter. I heard from my father-in-law. He spent the middle of the winter in Ottawa one time, and that solved all his woes in New York. Okay, so today's topic.
I was going to see if I was just going to New York when he was living here. Just played out.
Yeah. So today's topic is entitled Mikvah Construction. Different designs and customs. Harvey, when you were writing the introduction, the email to this week's share, Harvey assigned the fact that I'm giving a series on construction. Since last week we gave a share on Erev construction, so this week we're giving a share on Mikvah construction.
I think all your shirim are constructive.
Thank you very much. That wasn't really my intention. To leave maybe some politics aside, one of the impetuses to do the share, anyone who's paid attention driving through North Miami Beach, notice on every bus stop there are signs for, usually bus stops are not the place to advertise for such things, but there are some signs about the new mikvah being built here in North Miami Beach. There are some adjectives and advertising slogans with it that probably could caught some people's attention. But if it's a topic that's happening around us, we should understand more about mikvah construction and the different types of mikvah construction. Now, in general, we all know that a mikvah is a very important part of the Jewish community. Jewish community that, in fact, we're in the days of Shovavim, days that we give chizuk to this area. Taras Mishpacha, a family keeping the laws of purity, is a big deal. And really the idea that every community having their own mikvah is very important. Chazal even talk about having a mikvah before a shul. That's how important the building of a mikvah is. So it's a big deal. And obviously anyone who supports the upkeep or the building of mikvahs is a tremendous thing. But actually similar to what we also talked about last week by Erevin, besides the fact that Erevin are also very important for community, but a mikvah is something, mikvahs, very few people have real bikiyas, real tremendous knowledge in the topic, the halachic area of mikvahs. And even the tremendous halachic understanding is not enough. In building a mikvah, you need a lot of technical building engineering ideas. I might say, just from researching it, it seems from the outside, in some ways maybe it's even more than Erevin. And we saw last week, Erevin could be quite complicated. We talked about the Google Earth, monitoring and figuring out landscapes and constantly checking things, and so many things that go into checking and setting up an Eruv and knowing landscaping and building and so many areas of construction. Building a mikvah too also requires a lot of engineering and construction ideals. And as we'll see in today's share, through the ages, there have been different ideas of how to construct the mikvah, and really something that the people involved have to be absolute buckies, absolute experts in the halachos of mikvahs, but also in terms of building. Practically nowadays, there are certain people that are known to be, experts in design of a mikvah. Someone told me a story where they were checking into a mikvah and they wanted to show the plans to a certain posek. Posek said, "Who made the plans?" So, said, "This person." "Oh, this person, I'll have to check it. I know he knows what he's doing." There are experts out there in the field of mikvahs to turn to, just like there are experts in the field of Eruvin, and definitely people involved in projects should turn to such people. Now, in terms of mikvahs, the basics in the olden days, mikvahs were pretty easy, right? You have a pond of water, you have a mayan, spring, and people went in water, springs, over old times. Over,
They found the quotes in houses in Beitar.
so I'm about to get to that. Yes. Yes. Lemaisa Haguva, because they were so high up. Over the ages, and people living, as you just perfectly described, on mountains, right, in Eretz Yisrael, in all different spots. You're bringing up Beitar, I believe Masada. They found, through the ages, they started building indoor mikvahs. And the most classic indoor mikvah, if you find in one of your excavation trips, you'll find a hole in the ground, and that is the mikvah, right? One of the most famous mikvahs, right? The Arizal's mikvah in Tzfas. Talk about cold.
Ice cold.
Ice cold. You guys are not freezing today here in the share, even if you have gloves on. Try going to the Arizal's mikvah, right? What they say about the Arizal's mikvah, if you go to the Arizal's mikvah in Tzfas, you'll be guaranteed to do tshuva before you die, right? The joke is, that means while you're in the mikvah, before you die, you'll be doing tshuva. But, Hanan, you probably went, right? It's over.
Is it deterrent to have to go to?
Yeah. So, okay. So no, for those of us who've seen Arizal's mikvah, it's one pit in the ground, 40 saw, right? That's simple. Over the ages, people started building mikvahs in different ways. Not just a hole in the ground, for basically two reasons. Halachic and hygienic. Halachically, okay, if you're using a mikvah just for a small, it's your own personal mikvah, so you need 40 saw. Measurement of 40 saw has to be in the mikvah. If your mikvah is exactly 40 saw, the Mishnayos and mikvahs talk about this. So obviously over time, you're taking water with you, and the mikvah will dip, excuse the pun, below 40 saw. Right? It's going to be less than 40 saw, so you're not going to have a kosher mikvah. And especially when you want to build a mikvah that's to be used by the public, if multiple people are constantly going into this mikvah, so over time, you're going to lose water. So there's a need to have a mikvah that will not lose water over time. So that's one reason to change from the old version of just building one hole in the ground. The second, especially, now it could be in olden times they weren't so into this stuff, but nowadays there's a thing called, hygiene. It's not so geschmack to go into a mikvah where other people already have gone multiple times. Thus, you want a mikvah that is cleaned out and that is more hygienic. Notice I used the word more hygienic. So, you want a mikvah that's cleaner. So that also led to the idea of having multiple boroughs, multiple mikvahs. And the basic idea is you're going to have one source of 40 saw. That's going to be the source, some people call it the otzer, the source of your kosher mikvah. And then you're going to have another, it's called a big pool, where everyone's going to go in. And that pool, you're going to change the water. And they're going to make it nice, hygienic. We'll talk about heating it up. And that's going to be the mikvah that people are going into. But here's the tricky thing. Your first mikvah, the 40 saw and no one's going into, okay, that's your kosher mikvah. The other one, you're filling up with hose water, with rainwater, not with rainwater. Mayim she'uvim, tap water from the pipes, from whatever. So how do you make that second pool into a mikvah? So that's what we're going to go through today. Just set down basics and then go through different designs of how people do it. So really, this is a modern day issue where we're into both halacha and hygiene, and we're not just going to have, look, if you want to build in your backyard, figure out how to build a mikvah. You know, it does rain over here. We're not in the desert in Arizona, Nevada. So you could have a 40 saw rainwater mikvah in your backyard. You know, unfortunately, I do remember some situations, someone building a mikvah in their house in Brooklyn, and I don't know, bad construction people, and they blew up the whole house. I remember such a story. Right?
They had a gas line.
Yeah, it was actually one of those, illegal constructions, and, the people,
Oh, it's illegal construction.
illegal construction. A guy installing a mikvah in his house, and the whole house blew up. But, so don't try this at home without knowing what you're doing, or contractors know what they're doing. But for the most part, nowadays we're building mikvahs, it's going to be what we call two mikvahs. A source of a mikvah, a classic 40 saw mikvah, together with another big pool where you're going into, where people are using. How do you connect those pools? So it's basically two mahalchim. One idea, both of these are spelled out in the Mishnayos throughout the mikvahs. One is the concept of hashaka, literally kissing. You want the water of the kosher mikvah just to kiss, just to touch, ever so slightly, really even a small relative amount, where the water of the kosher mikvah comes in contact and kisses the water of this pool, and that kiss will not be a kiss of death, it will be a kiss of purity, and now this mikvah, now this bigger pool, will now become a kosher mikvah. Very cool halachos, right? That one I brought down. If you look in Maseches Mikvos, Parak Vav, Mishnah Ches, Mitarin as a mikvos, we could be mitar a mikvah, a body of water. Hal elyon min atachton, an upper one through a bottom one. Varachok min akarov, something further from something close. Ketzat, maybe silun shel cheres or shel aver. You bring a pipe of pottery or the like. Umeniach yado tachtav, ashim izmal mayim. It's filled with water. Umoshko mashiko afil kisara dayo. And it flows and it kisses the waters of the kosher 40 some mikvah to these other waters. It's kosher. So practically speaking, we'll get to the exact design in a minute, but if you have some type of hole between your 40 saw mikvah and this other big pool, that would be sufficient to kosher the pool. So now the pool is a kosher place to go into, kosher mikvah.
Does there have to be a transference of the water?
Yes. There's some touching, some transference of water, but even the relatively small amount, we'll see, that's good enough to make a kosher mikvah. Now your pool is kosher. That's one basic idea. The other concept is zriya. Zriya has more of a flow, but basically the idea of Zriya is I have a 40 saw mikvah. Once I have a 40 saw mikvah, I could roll into it hundreds and hundreds of lugin, hundreds and hundreds of measurements of tap water, and it's still a kosher mikvah. Because once you're 40 saw, you can absorb as much mayim shuvim and be good. It's only when you dip under 40 saw, then you have your problems. But once you're 40 saw and you have a stable 40 saw rainwater mikvah, you could flow into it other water and it'll all be good. So that too people do to connect two areas on mikvahs.
Is there any issue with, I guess, how fast you add that other mayim shuvim?
How quickly it goes in?
If you theoretically had a giant tank and you were able to dump it all in at once versus letting it.
Does it need to be bottled in the mikvah each time?
Basically.
I don't think so. I'm not sure. Good question. How exactly do the process? Right.
But like an industrial hose.
Yeah. I saw someone giving a share in mikvahs, so I thought he had a very good analogy. He said, I'm giving a share of how to build mikvahs. But, just like you wouldn't watch a YouTube video of a doctor performing surgery and then try it yourself, please do not watch this video and try to build a mikvah by yourself. Right? I'm giving that same warning. And especially don't do it without proper permitting in your house, lest the house blow up. Yes, all those warnings.
That's what I tell my clients. Don't write your own will. You don't want to perform brain surgery on yourself.
Now, practically speaking, now that we have these two basic concepts of how to connect water, either through just a minimal kissing of the water from the 40 saw to the pool, or more of a flow, a zriya between the two. So I want to go through basically 3 different designs of how to build mikvahs. Okay, 3 different designs. However you're looking for the other picture, I only put down 2 of the more complicated ones. Now, the most basic way that we build mikvahs is bor mitzad bor, a mikvah one alongside of the other, which basically means, yes?
Who are we?
We, compadre.
What was that?
You're going to get that.
I got that. How do we build mikvahs? I still stick to my words. How do we build mikvahs? So the basic way that we build mikvahs is side by side. You have a 40 saw mikvah of rainwater. That's your otzur, that's your source. Next to it, you have your bigger pool, and that's where everyone's going into, right? They're not going to, in the average mikvah, you go into a room, you don't see the other source. Not that you walk in and you see 2 pools. No, it's behind the wall, you don't have to see the connection. But there is another mikvah that's attached to that, and that's the 40 saw. That connects on a hole on the side of the wall to the big pool that everyone's going into. And as long as that hole is open, that mikvah, that big pool is kosher. It's a kosher mikvah.
Why doesn't it remain open?
Hmm?
Why doesn't it remain open once you kasha?
Say it again?
Why would it need to remain open?
My Shafron's asking, how come you need the hole to be open? Once it's kashered, why can't you then shut the hole?
That's the mikvah.
Yeah, so, yeah, so that's true. What happens though, firstly, for sure they bring up issues when they want to clean out the mikvah and then put more water in, so then you can need to open it to rekasher it. But what about, once I created it, could I then shut the hole? So I'm not sure. The whole business gets very tricky. That really is one of the parts of this mikvah where people get a little nervous. Because you could have a mitzias, right? That hole is so important because that's going to be the way to kasher the mikvah. If you shut the hole and let's say you're cleaning it out, now someone else goes into the mikvah without that hole being opened. So they just went in the pool of water. They didn't go into a mikvah, and their tahara was done improperly. And then a woman's with her husband, child is, that's not good. That's problems.
So, let's say, for instance, you set up a system where you refill after every person went in. There's a simple bathtub with a hole. Fill it up, use it, dump it.
Yes, so in that type of case, right, Rabbi Shafford's dreaming of a super hygienic mikvah, which I do not think exists, where they constantly change the water of a mikvah, right? That's definitely forward thinking.
It only uses the size of a bathtub.
Huh?
I know he's about 100 gallons.
Okay.
About 47.
Yeah,
An average bathtub is about that size.
not bad.
The concept of kissing, is that after going on all the time?
So that's what Rabbi Shafford was asking. So I'm not sure. Part of the issue with, these holes is the idea of the fear that it won't be constantly reopened. But you're right, nowadays we could do things, we could program things, we could have smart mikvahs. And you could program that that hole to constantly open, to unplug it and work it. Yeah, maybe. But there's a lot of forward thinking going on in here. This is very impressive. Right? We're coming up with new designs right here, right now. Smart mikvahs. I'll have to figure out what the price tag on such a thing would be. Not so simple. Now,
Virtual connections.
yeah. But if once it touched it, I made it kosher, so does it always have to be open? Now, there's a second design of a mikvah, not side by side, but rather one on top of the other. To start off, the same basic principle that I'm having one mikvah kiss the other mikvah, but here your source of the mikvah will be your bottom mikvah, and the one on top of it, that will be the pool that everyone's going into. Now the origin of this comes from one of the Lubavitcher Rebbes, of Shalom Ber, I believe the Rashab. What did I say? Funny, but that's what you talked about before, and that has become what the world calls Lubavitch Mikvah. Nabor Galibor. For the record, Satmar is also into this. It's not just the Lubavitch thing.
Wow.
Satmar, is pretty big.
Can anyone argue when Lubavitch and Satmar agree?
The Satmar have both?
Huh?
The Satmar have both?
What do you mean by both?
They do it both.
Oh, we'll get to that. That's the deluxe version, coming soon.
One's from Brooklyn, one's from Monroe.
Right. But I think they agree about how to do a mikvah, though. But the Lubavitch version of building a mikvah is bor al gabi bor, is one on top of the other. Now, what's the chachma, what's the kunz in doing it that way? So firstly, they hold a few things. So number one, again, people being nervous about the hole being closed. People being nervous about the hole being closed. So in here, where it's one on top of the other, it seems they keep the hole always open. And now a little tricky. Okay, the hole's always open, so that means it's always flowing between the two. What happens though if someone steps on the hole? Right? So then it's not flowing in between the two. It's not kissing between the two. So then,
When you're stepping, no one's being able to say anything anyhow because you're not free in the water, right? You can't be holding the wall while you're actually totaling.
right, no, but you're stepping on the floor of the mikvah.
Say, no, you pick your feet up.
Pick your feet up when you.
Oh, you mean because you get the bottom of your feet?
Right.
Say, what if there are two people in
So
the
you
mikvah?
never,
You mean-
you never
you
can
see it.
totaling when your foot on the floor.
What if there are two people in the mikvah? If someone else is in the mikvah?
Okay, right. Then it's right.
Okay, good, huh? So, I guess if the,
It only happens in men.
in the classic side by side where the holes in the side, so I guess they're not worried about a guy rubbing up against it and blocking the flow.
But you just keep the hole open, side by side. That's the problem, just keep
Keep a side by side hole open also.
the problem.
No, because I'm bottom and top one. We're talking about one mikvah on top of another
The whole
mikvah.
reason that they want to do the organized work is they want to keep the hole open, is they just do it side by side. Keep the hole
No,
open.
the bar is a flow issue.
Yeah, so we'll get back to that, hold on. Part of the reason why, they sometimes close the hole also is you want to keep, your original 40 saw intact to some degree. So that's also a reason they put a stopper there. But anyway, on the one on top of the other one, the bor agabe bor, so Sholem Ber also instituted to have two holes. So just in case someone's stepping on one hole, you have a hole on the other side, so that they wouldn't. But, so in general, they keep the hole open, which they think is a maila over the side-by-side one. Also,
Put a grate, once you play like that, put a grate on top.
you want to put a grate, where are you putting a grate?
Like a box,
Only
like
if
one of
it's big
those, like
enough
a
that
dome
your foot's
grate.
not covering the whole thing.
No steps on it.
It's bigger than it.
So stop, no one gets near there, yeah. It could be in design, huh?
They put a cage on top of it, like that.
Yeah, I don't want people banging themselves into it. People could sue people for
It's
mitzvahs
a
too.
practical question.
Like a drain in a swimming pool.
Right. You want a flat floor. But you have a flat floor with the grate.
They have a grate, they also have a rounded grate. I was like, that's a practical question.
No,
They
okay.
have a practical solution.
Yeah.
If the halacha question is really
Right. Okay, but there's another reason. This sounds like the main reason why this Lubavitch approach to build a bor agabe bor is there's a sheet of the Ravid. The Ravid shita is that your original mikvah, which has the 40 sa of mikvah water, that should never go down to less than half of 40 sa. It would be less than 20 sa, basically. So where you have, let's say, one side by side and the what's it called open and the hole open, so technically the water eventually does drain out of that 40 saw mikvah. You're gonna have to make sure to refill it eventually. But so you're not gonna have, you have less than your rove 40 saw doing that hashaka in the side-by-side mikvah. In this mikvah, they claim you won't have that problem. Part of it is based a little bit on physics, because it's one on top of the other. Your top mikvah, where people are going into, nowadays, all those mikvahs, we don't do, nowadays, all kemat, I'm sure in most places, your mikvahs are heated up. So if your top water is hot water, which is heated, your bottom sourced mikvah is cold water, so hot water rises, and the cold water and the hot water don't mix. That's a nice chap of bor agabe bor. That's how they do it. So you heat the top one, there's no point to spending extra money to heat the bottom one. You don't do that. Why should you? No one's going there anyway. Keep it cold, keep it separate, and everything's great. Right?
Well, I mean, hot water, it's not that heat rises, it's heat tends to rise is the technical term, because eventually a little bit will come down. So over time, eventually they'll have to refill the bottom one with kosher rainwater.
Yes. Now, we'll get back to this idea of the Ravid. Who for Halacha, we don't pass on the Ravid, it's a Das Yachid. And it is a little funny just to try to build a mikveh to be Yotzei some Shita, which no one holds of. Yes?
So, just practically speaking, do they keep the heater on all the time, even when it's not in use? And do they keep the mashika open the whole time? Because if they only turn it on to heat it when it's being used, and when it's off, you still might have the problem.
Yes, I'm not sure the heating, right, interesting point. I'm not sure the heating element, how do they practically run the clothes? They have it heated the whole time. I can't imagine how much it costs, but I'm sure it costs good money. Anyone goes to these houses in Orlando, right? How much extra you have to pay for heating the pool, right? And these mikvahs usually are nice size. It depends on the pools in Orlando too, but.
Yeah, it's so expensive to heat it. They can't keep it on all the time.
Right. It could be they'll only keep it heated for hours, the mikvah is in session. Now, so this, if it just stopped here, okay, so there's two ways to do it. You could do it side by side, you could do it one on top of the other. Okay, normal, one approach. There's Chabad approach. It does get a little tricky. The Sanzarov, the Divrei Chaim, wrote a tshuva and was very negative towards Chabad's version of a mikveh. And he based it on the concept, Mishnah and Taharos, that Katafris Eino Chibur, that when you have something connecting through a slope does not make a connection. So if you're connecting side by side, there's no slope. It's going in one mikvah into the other, is going in side by side. But where it's going in one on top of the other, there's a concept that we have in Taharos of katafris eino chibur. If something is sloping together, that's not called a connection. Connections can only be horizontal, not vertical. Now, that itself, if you stop right there, that's tricky. That means that you should not use a mikvah, ideally, that's made one on top of the other. The better way is to design is do it side by side. When you do one on top of the other, Divrei Chaim says you have a problem. Katafris eino chibur. So Rav Moshe brings the Divrei Chaim. Rav Moshe has two tshuvas on this topic in Igros Moshe Yerodei Chel Gimel Siman Samachay. It's interesting siman because he brings in one siman two different tshuvas. You don't find that so often. Usually two tshuvas are found in two different spots. And here he decided to publish two tshuvas together in the same siman. So the first one, I believe was written earlier. So there he brings the Divrei Chaim, the Sanzarov. And then he says, look, I'll read from the third line. I'll read from the beginning. Why not? B'dvar mikvah agabe mikvah asher Divrei Chaim chilk beis posel. He literally parcels the mikvah. Mishum shav chibur derech katafris ve'ino machsher afil mipsul she'uvim. It doesn't undo the issue of your pool is tap water. Hin mistaver kavase be'uvda huda bora tachtom mimayim ksherim. Rav Moshe says depends on the design of how the mikvah on top of mikvah is built. And he says the Sanzarov would be right in a case where the bottom bore, which is the kosher water, you have a top on a pool with mayim she'uvim, and connecting them with a pipe from top to bottom, that'll be a problem. You're having basically a piece of the ground, piece of the tile, really cut out. If you look actually in my picture, There's a picture, it's not my picture, but I found it. If you look at the bottom of your sheets, you see that picture. The right side picture is a picture of this, we call a Chabad Mikvah Bor Agabi Bor. So where the bottom O's Bays, that's your 40 saw kosher mikvah. The top part was used with regular water, that's your mikvah pool. If you see, there's basically a plank. There's a whole big tile, that square box with a hole. That tile is the practical way in which these mikvahs are built. So Rav Moshe says, if you have a ritzvah nekuva mafseket ben amaylaman, you have a hole in the ground, in the flooring. Sheyesh yichashav ze mamash mikvah achas. You know what? Mastava, that really has a din of one mikvah. I believe Chabad says it might even be called the Maila of Zriya. It's really flowing from one to the other. It's not you're connecting two mikvahs. Rav Moshe says you can argue the Chabad mikvah is kosher, and this issue that the Divrei Chaim brings up, that's an issue if there's a pipe connecting them. But where it's really just a plank, and without that plank there, is all one big area. So Moshe says you could view it as one big mikvah, and that wouldn't be a problem. Okay?
What was the Divrei Chaim talking about?
Huh?
What was the Divrei Chaim talking about?
The Divrei Chaim, so Moshe says, the Divrei Chaim's argument makes sense in a case of where there's a pipe between the two. So it's a sloping pipe, not where the whole floor would technically opens. You're not opening the whole floor at once. You're just having a little hole open. But really, that whole piece could be lifted up. So Moshe says that's different, maybe. At least that's what he writes first in this tshuva. Now, for the record, the idea of the Divrei Chaim, that Katafres and Chibur potentially being a problem, was not something even the Divrei Chaim invented. I found in the Mishnayos, so I'm not sure fully.
Stays one, stays really one.
Right.
If the whole top of the bottom pool was overfilled, but in the case of the picture on the right, the whole top of the pool is like a small section.
Right.
It makes it still work.
It's much larger than the small hole. It's just,
Right.
It's just
So Moshe says in Lumdis somehow we could call that, like he's saying, like one big thing.
Why don't you say the same thing with the hole?
Now,
We might have to know what size the hole is. It's not the same size as the whole pool.
right. Now, I'll show you a fascinating thing. If you look in, hold on. If you look in the Tiferes Yisrael, in the Mishnayos, I found, it's on the Mishnah that we talked about of doing Hashaka, Os Beis I have there. Ve'ein lahakshos, dal kaponim ketafres in a chibur. The time of the Divrei Chaim. How can you connect these two mikvos? Right? Where the Mishnah itself talked about ha'elyon min ha'tachton, katafres ein chibur, sloping does not connect. Yesh lomar dahainu d'lechashiv ha'elyon v'tachton k'nechubarim. Katafres ein chibur would say the top and the bottom are not fully connected into one. Aval k'kavana machshiva shabbat k'negoin. So he gives an answer that Katafres in a Chibur would stop it from being considered one big mikvah, but it wouldn't be a problem of Negiah. That's how he dances around this. Interesting. Now Rav Moshe is saying stronger. Rav Moshe is saying, no, it could be considered somehow one big mikvah, which definitely is not so pashut as a defense.
If the whole floor was missing,
Yeah.
then stop. Let's say instead of having a big box underneath, you have just one long pipe that's 40 sub, all the way down to the floor.
Yeah.
And that was your 3 foot,
Yes.
you get more explosive, amount of 40 sub straight vertically down.
Right. I'm not sure how to explain that fully. I do want to show you, though, there's a second tshuva for Rav Moshe. What's interesting, who is this tshuva sent to? I remember 25 years ago here in Miami, he gave a share here in Yeshiva, Rabbi Stern. Rabbi Stern, the old-time Rav of Miami Beach. Rabbi Tibor Stern. Here he's referred to as Shmuel Tuvia. But yes, Rabbi Tibor Stern, the old Rav of Miami Beach, sent this tshuva to Rav Moshe. He was asking about heating up a mikvah. Like, I don't know why Miami Beach were the first ones to think of heating up a mikvah. Because the people in Florida couldn't deal with the cold, as we see here.
Maybe they were chilling the bottom.
Yeah, I don't know. But it sounds to be funny that the first shiloh that was sent to Moshe about heating up a mikvah came from posh, Miami Beach. But anyway, so Moshe here goes again through the issue of the Divrei Chaim's Taina on the Chabad Bor Agabe Bor Mikvah, and he gives a similar type answer. But he writes, I'm reading like 6 lines by the end of that first paragraph, column. Moshe says, sounds like he's writing here, is even after he gave the same chilot he gave before to defend the mikvah of Bor Agabe Bor, but he's not sure about it. There still might be an issue there. Then he goes further. Then he heard about the Satmar Rav, was very into Bor Agabe Bor, and he writes in the last line, right? This happened back then too. Look what he writes. Miami Beach. Nowadays, Rav Moshe wrote this in Tafshin Lamed Gimel. Wow. Yeah. 40 years ago. Lamed Gimel.
We're in pay.
Huh? Sorry, pay. You're in pay already, right?
It took me a second too.
Right? Rav Moshe wrote this 50 years ago, but for the past 50 years, Satmar Hasidim have been coming to Miami Beach. Nothing has changed in the past 50 years. How did I come to North Miami Beach? Also, some of that someone still go to Miami Beach. So he writes, okay? People, Satmar Hasidim want this. Maybe we should do this. Now look what he writes after this. Even if you're going to argue and defend the Chabad mikvah that there's no psul of katafris, but don't tell me there's any milo, Rav Moshe writes. Then he comes up with a pretty strong kasha. I never found in the Shulchan Aruch Harav, the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, doesn't mention anything about this in Hilchos Mikvos. I didn't find in Sefer Tzemach Tzedek anything about this. Moshe is really questioning, this Chabad minhag is relatively modern. The original Rebbes didn't do this. You don't find this in the Shulchan Aruch Harav. You don't find this in the Sefer Tzemach Tzedek. So why are you all of a sudden being machbid on having Bor Agabe Bor? Pashtus is the Alter Rebbe went to a mikvah which is side by side. So if a Chabad person tells you he can't go to a mikvah that is side by side, just ask him the question: which mikvah did the Alter Rebbe go to? The Shulchan Aruch Harav. That's Rav Moshe's kasha. Now, L'maisa, he does right at the end, it sounds like Moshe is very into being politically correct and servicing as many people as possible. Oh, it's good that you make a mikvah that works for many people. But just in terms of design of a mikvah, if you ask Moshe straight up how to design a mikvah, Moshe will tell you side by side. Is there, and are people want to do one on top of the other? Yeah, there definitely are. Where Moshe says he doesn't see any milah on one on top of the other, then by side. Oh, so I was going to get to that one. The clock is ticking, but let me quickly just spell out. If you look in the bottom left-hand column, there's a whole complicated deluxe mikvah, what I call. There, you really have 3 or 4 mikvahs going on over there. This is trying to get every pitchifka, as they call it.
Satisfy all shit.
Yeah, there's really 4 mikvahs going on over there. You have the big mikvah for tefillah. You have one, this is from the Chelkas Yaakov, really developed first this mikvah idea in Zurich, where you have the upper of those 2 next to each other. That's a bor zriya, and that has a big hole. And basically you're flowing the water, before you saw, into the big mikvah. So the first mikvah, the pool is being connected through zriya, through sewing, but also, you see in the bottom side, there's another mikvah there. That's being connected through neshika. So you're basically connecting your big pool 2 ways, through the zriya and through neshika. And the neshika one happens to be a bor agabi bor. So you get Chabad Satmar in that too.
Only if you go into that.
Yes, I was wondering about that part too, how exactly that works.
If the Shika side by side doesn't work, so you have to go into the Chabad people have to go into it.
No, but if it's emanating, the original mikvah where it's doing the original hashaka, but there's 2. The second, it's only weak, as strong as the weaker one. I'm not sure. But Sheffield, you had some good kashas today. I'm glad you're here.
Why is it so complicated? You just have to decide how it works.
Yeah, so there are some people nowadays, they build mikvahs with all these milas. Again, I saw from Moshe, Moshe doesn't seem to see what the milah is of this, of doing the Chelkas Yaakov's way either, so simply, Lamaisa, anyone knows every extra step you have in building mikveh, you can build as many more you want, but it drives up the price. It makes it much more complicated, so a community has to make decisions, what's worthwhile for them to do. You deal with public funds, and it's not easy to fundraise for these things, how to do these things. I did hear, I spoke to one posted about it. He says, the idea of having a mikvah that's connected in both ways, through both hashaka and zriya, is a nice milah to have. You could have that, and it works, but okay. End of the day, there are these different designs of the mikvahs. Pasha Pshat, it seems, according to all shitas, you could go in the Ikar Adin, could utilize all these things, as long as it's a kosher mikvah, whether it's connected through hashaka side by side, that should be kosher for everyone. If it's connected through hashaka, one on top of the other, Moshe gives pretty much a heter for everyone. If they're using zriya, that's good. As long as you have, competent rabbinic bodies on top of this body of water, then you are good and okay. Problem is when you have a mikvah when it's not run by Rabbanim, and they're not really on top of it. It's more of a private mikvah that some guy decided he wanted to build. So then you could run into more problems and question the kashrus of such a idea. But either way, what emerges from here, with all these different designs and ideas, is building mikvah is complicated stuff. And only the most competent, well-trained, both halachic and practical engineering people should be involved in the building of these mikvahs.
So someone's not going to use a Chabad, besides for the...
It sounds like from Moshe, yes.
He
Yes.
said not to use the Chabad.
Yes. I'll end with one quick story. You could.
Okay. A man.
You know, one of the, we're talking about just in general, watching over a mikvah, you know, one of the trickiest things, I was discussing with my son, he understands building with concrete. You know, one of the tricky things in the mikvah is not to have holes in the mikvah where there can be leakage.
Oh, yeah.
You want to have your 40 saw intact. It could be leakage. So firstly, they say nowadays when they pour the cement, if you're the Rav Hamachshar on the mikvah, you don't just give over your plans to the foreman, the contractor, and let him do the rest. The Rav should be there at the pouring of the cement to see how it was poured. That it was poured well, that it won't have cracks. That's how intensely the involvement of a Rav should be in the building of a mikvah. I remember I was Zocha, I did Shimash by Rabbi Bluth, one of the top Talmidim of Rav Moshe. He was involved in building his own mikvah in his community. He was hawking all the time about it. All different ideas, chaps. You really have to be on top of these things. But interesting, you have to check a mikvah periodically that there's no leakage. When do you do it? Practically what you have to do is, put down all the water in the mikvah and fill it up and see if there's any leaks. So when do you shut down a mikvah? Rav Moshe Feinstein, the Lower East Side mikvah, which he would be personally in charge of, he would be very against shutting it down any other time of the year, because if you shut it down, that means people can't use it. He would dafka check it on Tisha B'Av. That was a Moshe's chap, because husband and wives can't be together anyway, no one's going to the mikvah, so he'd check it on Tisha B'Av. I believe that custom spread Klal Yisrael. The Moshe's, we do it on Tisha B'Av, and if you see a Rav going in and out of a mikvah on Tisha B'Av, now you understand why. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening, and have a wonderful, warm week.